The fish. The fish are a large group. Most of them fall into um, a are easy to group. However, so we're talking about mostly um, we have the chondrichthyes, which are sharks, skates, rays, that group, and then we have the ray-finned fish, and this is a small group down here. So those are most of the fish. Okay, the Myxini. These are the hagfish, which are a small, relatively obscure group. They have heads supported by cartilaginous bars. They lack vertebrae, and they actually retain their notochord. Most of the vertebrates develop beyond that, and the notochord is only embryologically. They have 4 pairs of sensory tentacles around the mouth, which you see here. They're well known for their slime, which they use as a means of defense, and they scavenge dead and dying fish. Then we move into the actual vertebrates, which have a nerve cord. We have the extinct agnathans, which had body armor and were bottom dwellers. But then we're going to go to the Petromyzontida, which you have some marine and some freshwater representatives. Most of them are predators as adults and filter feeders as larvae. These are the lampreys. They're known mostly for being parasites because they feed on bony fish. So they burrow in with their teeth onto the side and latch onto the side of bony fish, then rasp in with their tongue and suck dry a bony fish. However, not all of them do. There are some known as brook lampreys that the adults don't feed at all. The gnathostomates, the jaws develop from anterior pharyngeal arches. They do have paired appendages. These are the chondrichthyes, the actin. I actually mentioned these groups as already. Let's talk about the chondrichthyes first. They have placoid scales, which are pointy on the ends. They look in this, and a cartilaginous skeletons. So you're talking about the shark, skates, and rays, which are the elasmobranchs, and then a smaller group known as the ratfish, which are the holocephalids. So the holocephalids have an operculum, which is that flap over the gills that the elasmobranchs lack. So this is a ratfish here. These two I'm sure you're much more familiar with. So here you're looking at some of the scales. Sharks' teeth are actually modified scales. The Sarcopterygini, these are the lobe-finned fish. The fins are actually muscular. Lungs are used in gas exchange. These are the lungfish. There are only 3 genera of them, Australia, Africa, South America. They have a tendency to live in pools that dry up. They bury themselves and submerge themselves into the mud and breathe air for a period of time. It's also the coelacanths, which are even more, this is coelacanth, that are even more bizarre, almost evolutionary ancestor-like. So these are the lungfish up here, and they are breathing air part of the time. Ray fin fish, again, fins lack muscular lobes, and they also have something called swim bladders, which are what controls their depth in the water column. These are some of the examples of them. Here's a sturgeon, which are what are most well known for getting caviar from, and paddlefish. Then we have a flounder, which if you look very carefully, fin, eyes. Their eyes are actually on the side of their body. They're bottom dwellers. Yellow snappers. Locomotion. Fish are very streamlined as a group. They do produce mucus secretion in many cases to help reduce friction between them and the water. They are very muscular and very lean. Their fin shape promotes all efficiency of locomotion. Their nutrition is most of them are predators, most of the modern fish. There are some filter feeders, there are some scavengers, but most of them are carnivores. You do have a few external parasites and a few random herbivores. Specializations in their digestive tract would include things like the spiral valve, which increases surface area of the digestive system, or pyloric cecal of the bony fish. Circulatory system is closed. They do have their heart, which pumps blood throughout their body. Most fish have a single circuit, and that it's relatively simple. Blood comes in over the gills and pumps one way. Lungfish is a little different than that. So water movement over the gills is done by water. In most fish, water comes in the mouth and is forced by a pressure system. It's pumped over using the operculum over the gills. For those fish that lack the operculum, they must remain in constant movement. That's known as ram ventilation, so that they swim with their mouth open and force water in over the gills. As water enters, it is in a relationship with the gills of countercurrent exchange in order to maximize the efficiency of oxygen exchange. It's a passive diffusion of oxygen from the water into the gills. So because there's more oxygen in the water than there are in the gills, oxygen is going to passively diffuse into the gills. So it actually continues that the blood flows in the opposite direction of concentration than the water does with oxygen in order to maximize efficiency. Swim bladders and lungs. Again, as I mentioned, this controls the depth you are in the water column. So for fish that use swim bladders, they have a way to do that. The lungfish may use lungs instead if they have something like that, or the climbing fish, perch. That's a very few number of fish that actually have that to use. Buoyancy regulation may also be done with maintaining low density compounds in the body, using their fins, reducing heavy tissues. Is one of the reasons why fish are such a lean meat. They don't have a lot of fat, and again, swim bladders. They do have a simple brain and spinal cord. They also have a significant number of sensory receptors, something called external nares. Um, their eyes, their vision is functions. Their eyes are lidless and they do have a round lens. It's not acute in most cases, but it does function. They do have inner ears for equilibrium and balance. Hearing doesn't function overly well underwater, but they do have some sense of hearing. They also have a lateral line system, which is a line down the sides of their body, little pits that detect water current movements for a couple reasons. One is for locomotion, but potentially even more importantly is for detecting other individuals in the water and their way that they're swimming so that they know others around them and their condition. They also have in the sharks electroreception, magnetic reception. It's a way for them to actually hone in on their prey. They use something called ampullae of Lorenzini. It's on their snout and under their chin. Every living being gives off some kind of a magnetic field. You don't really realize it, but you do. And it's how they track and hone in on to make that final strike of their prey. Also used by, of course, electric fish, electric eels. Excretion and osmoregulation. They do have kidneys. Some of them are in more demand and are more taxed than others. If you are living in a freshwater system, your kidney is more in demand because it's much more likely that your ions are going to be leached out of your system and that you will definitely be taking on more water than if you are in a marine system. So the kidneys made up of nephrons, which are much more sophisticated and highly developed than they are in marine species. I just described that. Okay. Excretion and osmoregulation continued. These sharks also have a rectal gland, which is one of the things they use for ion balance. Fish that migrate between freshwater and marine systems have a variety of things they can do. They can use gills to assist in this system. They can have a sophisticated kidney like that of the freshwater kidney and just keep it, or they can alter their kidney when they migrate. Nitrogenous waste, things like most of the pneumonia goes across gill surfaces, about 10% of the urea, creatinine, and creatine goes across kidneys. Reproduction and development, most of the fish are oviparous. There are some ovoviviparous sharks and rays and skates as well. Okay, let me start over. There are some ovoviviparous elasmobranchs, and let's just leave it at that, and as well as viviparous. Fertilization is mostly external. They do have claspers, like in the dogfish shark. The claspers are a means to, one of them inserts into the female and acts as a guide for sperm during exchange, copulation. There's little to no parental care in most fish. There may be some. There are some fish who will actually, males will carry the brood in their mouth, mouth brooding, but relatively little parental care.